and the great Mike Milbury joins us on the Harbor One hotline. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Good morning.
So we are here. Greg is on a junket to Florida where he's flying first class with all-you-can-eat shrimp cocktail and all the rest, so you're stuck with me today. But we've been talking a bit this morning, Mike, about what could derail this Bruins season. What do we not see coming, or what concerns you most? Because this is getting to the point where it's cup or bust for this record-setting season.
Well, first of all, I think the trade that Sweeney made was just perfect. I mean, he didn't give up any real assets. Craig Smith notwithstanding, who's not having a good time of it right now. And he brought in a sort of prototypical defenseman, Russian-type defenseman, who's like 6 feet, stocky, can hit, can play both sides, which is a real asset for a coach to have, both sides, left or right defense. And Hathaway, who's got the attitude of Marchand, if not the skill. I mean, he's certainly not in that category of skill player, but he comes with an edge that is fun to watch, and it'll be useful in the playoffs. So I think they put themselves in a better position. What are the concerns? Well, you saw the last game against Calgary. You couldn't. I mean, in the end, Bergeron made a great play to set up the winner, but before that, he was nowhere to be found, and neither was Krejci. Fatigue. The schedule is crazy. They're going to have to sit him out. Let him take some games off. I think that's important, whether they want to or not. And I know that they have this sort of embarrassment of riches and depth. You can afford to do it. I mean, I think the last I looked, they were like 13 points up on Carolina for winning the conference title and getting home ice throughout. So fatigue is an enemy. Goalie inexperience is a factor that none of us will know. I mean, Ullmark has been. I mean, the last game was just silly good. 54 saves and timely saves, and as he's done all year long. And Swayman has come around. It's been so much fun to watch. I mean, the road trip in itself, the 4-game road trip, was just give you an indication of what this team is all about. First game, they win 6-5. Entertaining game, maybe loosely played. The next game, they play a lousy team in Vancouver. They win it, and they win it fairly comfortably, and the goalie scores. Then they go to Edmonton, and they face McDavid, and they find a way to get guys like Noshik and Foligno to chip in, and Zacha gets the game winner. Not the big guys, but that's another great sign. And then in Calgary, Ullmark stands on his head, and Orlov, he makes Sweeney look like a genius with a couple of goals and a great pass. It's been so much fun to watch this team. Now, is it bust, Stanley Cup or bust? I mean, the East is loaded. I mean, you guys saw what the Rangers did. They pick up Patrick Kane and Tarasenko. That gives them a lot of firepower. Their goaltender is arguably one of the top 3 or 4 goaltenders in the league. Their defense is underrated. Toronto loaded up. It's going to be getting out of this conference is going to be really tough.
Mike, you brought up the goaltending, and the one thing, or if you're in this position as Jim Montgomery as the coach, when do you get to the point where you say, or maybe it's already been said, okay, Linus is obviously the number one, and maybe we rest him a little bit because he's going to be the guy that we ride throughout the playoffs? Because there's no way you can pull Linus based on the year that he's having in the playoffs unless he has 2 or 3 games where he's just horrendous.
I think you're probably right. I think now is the time, with 6 weeks about to go to the end of the season. Selective starts for Ullmark. There's no need to whip him, but it's a fine line. You want to keep him sharp and you want to keep him rested. The same thing as with the older forwards. But I don't think you have to make any statement to anybody about this. I think you just talk to Ullmark and say, listen, we're going to play you these numbers of games, and we're going to make sure that you're ready to go in the playoffs. And Swayman, you got to stay sharp. I don't think it should be I don't think there's any real heavy lifting for Jim Montgomery to do, because you could play either one of them and look pretty good. But I think in the end, Ullmark has got to be your guy, number one guy. He's proven that he should be. But if he does falter with 2 or 3, not even 2 or 3 games, I mean, if he falters at all, Swayman's earned the right to be on his heels. So it's a great, as I said, an embarrassment of riches in goal and other positions. So not a concern for me, except for the fact that they don't have the experience of going through a long playoff run, and it is entirely different.
Mike, when it comes to trade deadline tomorrow, do you see them making any more moves, and how happy are you with what they've done so far?
You know what, I looked at the roster several times. I don't know what they need. I mean, could they use another scorer maybe on the third line? I guess so, but what assets do they have to give up anymore? I mean, unless they decided to go big and try to go for a guy like Kane, that's the only time you'd even think remotely about a Swayman in the deal, but that's gone. And I don't know who else is out there that would entice them. I think they're in a pretty good spot. I don't think they should. First of all, I think the heat is completely off. They made a move that the team loves, and that's important. The moves to pick up 2 players that they picked up says, we believe in you guys, and we think, we're going to patch some holes here in the depth department and give you guys a running start towards a Stanley Cup. So I don't see them doing anything. But Neely has indicated that they'll still be tinkering, and they should be. They should be making phone calls and kicking over stones and see what's there. But I don't see any urgency to their game plan.
Mike, what's at stake for Sweeney, Montgomery, Marchand, Bergeron? What does another title mean, and what will it mean if they fall short?
First of all, we have to enjoy the magic of this season. I know everybody says championships. It's not going to be easy here. They're going to find some big obstacles in their way.
It's looked easy all year, Mike.
I know it's looked easy all year, but as I just said, it's going to change when it comes to playoff time, and it's also going to change because these teams have beefed up in a significant way, and everybody has their eyes set on this target. It is not going to be an easy road to get out of the Eastern Conference. And I was talking to Keith Jones from TNT yesterday, and he said Colorado still looks like the team to beat in the Western Conference, and they could sail through the Western Conference, be rested and ready for anybody who comes out of the East, and that's not a good thing. But I mean, I have confidence that they, if you went through every team in the Eastern Conference, I can say the Bruins have a better team right now and are better prepared to beat them. But when you stack together 1, 2, 3 series in a row, you just don't know how they're going to come out of it. So I'm going to enjoy the regular season. I'm not going to dismiss it if they don't win a championship. If they win the President's Trophy, it's a feather in their cap. But I mean, nobody wants to go to a Bruins game paying $200 for a ticket and see a lousy game, and they've not done that this year. I think they should be proud of that. But obviously, the cherry on top of the sundae is the championship, and they're in as good a position as anybody in the Eastern Conference to make it happen. But there are variables that we've just talked about, and there are variables with opponents that have made significant roster changes that are going to make it more challenging. You
are sunshiny without Greg. I have to say, I like this optimistic Mike Milbury.
Well, don't get used to it.
Go ahead,
Mike. We all know what hockey means around here in New England and Massachusetts, but I'll watch ESPN, and they don't get the same type of coverage. And I'm wondering, a guy like Connor McDavid, you watch him play, and every time the puck was near him, I was kind of glued to the TV. Does the NHL ever get to the point where they say, okay, we need to market this guy somehow, some way, and maybe by doing that, it might be him getting out of Edmonton and getting to one of these franchises that are a little bit more
flashy,
and I guess in the American sense. Not that Edmonton isn't a great franchise, but do you kind of feel like
Edmonton sucks? But it's like nobody wants to go there. Mm-hmm. It's cold. It's out in the middle of nowhere. Downtown, I haven't been there in a long time, but downtown is kind of, it's just not that vibrant. And the case that you are making is the one. It's the perfect example. Is Gretzky's in Edmonton, and he goes to Los Angeles and changes the whole. It changes the whole picture. And I don't know why. Why McDavid wanted to sign a 8-year deal in Edmonton to begin with, when there were other opportunities that he could have had, if he just waited till he was a free agent. And, he's not going to lack for any money, but the league won't get involved in this. The league can't get involved in trying to force a team to trade a player to a big market. But I mean, you'd think the agent and the player themselves would think, hey, listen, this is not where I want to be for my entire career. And Manhattan is a gold mine for somebody like McDavid. And you're right. It's kind of a shame that he's in a backwater city, and we don't see him often enough because he is fun to watch.
Well, so Mike, isn't that also kind of an issue with the Connor Bedard sweepstakes as well, right? Like he's coming out and there's a chance he gets buried in a place like Arizona, and then two of your most exciting players could be stuck in just absolute crap?
Well, that's what you get when you start putting franchises in kind of out-of-the-way places. You take the money that you get for a franchise, and everybody in the ownership group is happy with the windfall, and then you're stuck with a team like Arizona that can't get out of its own way for, 15, 20 years. They've never been a viable franchise as far as I can tell in any significant way. And Edmonton's having trouble now too. They were the benefit of a number of things in the 80s that gave them a chance to run up a bit of a dynasty, but it hasn't been anywhere near close since then. So I mean, if you're a free agent, where do you want to go? Toronto or Edmonton? Do you want to go to Toronto or New York or Calgary? I mean, it's a no-brainer. You want to go to those places where you're center of attention, the money's bigger, the opportunities are better, and it's a lot more fun.
Well, Mike, I was going to ask you about where you fall on the Brad Marchand versus the 2025 All-Star Game location selection, but after hearing you talk about Edmonton, I would feel like you fall on Brad's side.
Well, listen, I think the All-Star Game is a joke. I think they ought to do something about it, get rid of it. There's no reason to stick in another game with your key players, your marquee players, in the middle of the season. Make them travel someplace so they can kiss babies and shake sponsors' hands and rattle the financial cages of these guys to keep on spending some money. I think it's a joke, especially with 82 games on the schedule and 4 playoff rounds ahead of the good teams.
But places like Edmonton, Detroit, Seattle, Brad doubled down and said, guys aren't taking less to play there, and it's a terrible place to play. You agree with that?
I do. And I wouldn't espouse anybody taking less to go to one of those cities, you should be paid more to go to those places. And that's what they did with McDavid, really. And, but again, the league decided to go to these places because, well, in the case of Edmonton, it was sort of absorbing the WHA. But still, I mean, Arizona, Florida they don't draw flies to their games, and they haven't been any good for a long time. It's, there's some questions to be asked of whether it's viable to have a league that is this widespread for our sport.
Would you pay Pastrnak $13 million a year more than McDavid makes annually?
Yeah, well, I would like to think that I would have had him signed up by now, and I wouldn't have had to pay him 13.
Right.
But I don't. I mean, everything's going up in every sport. Everything goes. When did McDavid sign? 3-4 years ago.
Yeah. Yep.
So I mean, everything's going up. So it's not out of the question to sign him, and there's no question about his value to this team for the next 8 years, which is what he would get. And I would say I wouldn't want to go there, but I guess I would go there if that's what it had to take.
Yeah, because Connor McDavid, when his contract's up in, it's looking like, 1, 2, 3 years, he's probably going to be somewhere, $17 million a year he's going to be looking for?
Yeah, it all depends on what the cap numbers are. I mean, I'm assuming that everything goes in the right direction for the National Hockey League, and he's gonna max out. He should be the most well-compensated player in the league because he is the best. Although I'll tell you, I'm not sold on Edmonton's chances of going deep when, they don't know how to play defense, and that includes McDavid, who on the Foligno goal coughed up the puck at the blue line, then came back and couldn't decide which guy to go to on the back check and wound up giving up a 2-on-1 goal. I mean, that's an indictment on him at this stage of his career and their coach, which is, defense wins championships, if you're of that mindset, Edmonton's got a lot of work to do, and so does McDavid.
All right, Chalmer, last one.
Yeah, so Mike, we've talked about the gauntlet that they would have to go through in the East. We know how the record-breaking season and the records they can still break here, the Bruins, that being, if they were able to do this, if they were able to get through the gauntlet of the East, they were able to break the record. They're the winningest regular season team of all time. Does this have to go, and then they win the Stanley Cup? Do they have to be in consideration to be like one of the best teams in the history of the sport?
Well, under the circumstances that you described, yeah. I mean, the best record in the regular season, they win the Cup, and they're going to win the Vezina Trophy, it looks like. I mean, Lindstrom's not going to win it. Probably Erik Karlsson will win the Norris because of the ridiculous year that he's having offensively on a bad team, but he'll get some consideration. I mean, Pastrnak could get votes for MVP. I mean, they're knocking over all sorts of obstacles. So if they can continue to do this, and they do it during the playoffs, yeah, you're going to have to. We will step back and review it then. But given your circumstances, yeah, they'd have to be considered one of the best of all time.
All right, Mike. Thank you as always. We'll talk to you next Thursday.
All right, guys. See ya.